everyone, thank you for joining me for another entry into our reading journal. I am Voodoo Pickles, and today we're going to be talking about The Djinn Waits 100 Years. This was written by Shebnam Khan and published in 2024, and the genres are fiction and historical and horror. Not historical horror, historical and horror. And I picked up this book because it was on one of those email lists where anticipated books coming out this year, and I was really excited about that. I love stories about Djinn, so I was like, I am all up in this, and I saw that horror tag in there, and I was like, yes, I definitely want to read this. So I put it on my library hold list, and it came through, surprising me. And it was pretty good. I read this through an audiobook, and this was a very interesting story. It wasn't a story that I was expecting going into it, but it was very well put together. So this story starts by talking about Sana. Sana and her father are going through a tough time. Her mother had recently just passed away. So they're leaving where they used to live, and they are moving to a different country. They are moving to try and get a fresh start, to try and leave behind the grief a little bit and just start something new. So where they are moving is to a mansion in Africa. And this mansion in Africa used to be huge and grand and just gorgeous and beautiful. But over the years, it has become run down, and the newest owner made sure that it was put into different apartments and the mansion was separated in different apartments and started letting people rent it out. So Sana and her father move into this new mansion. They have a new apartment, and they're starting their life there. And she's really hesitant. She doesn't really know anybody. She doesn't know the area. She's very upset of having to leave where her life was, but also very upset that she's still grieving the loss of her mother. And she's trying to be a good sport for her dad. Like, she's really trying to be a good sport for her dad. And she meets a couple of the residents. One of the residents, I don't remember her name, but she has a bird. I'm pretty sure it's a parrot. She has a parrot that she has all around, and that parrot goes everywhere. It can kind of talk, and she treats that parrot like kind of like a baby. And the parrot got out of the apartment she was living in and was in the little main foyer area, little main room area with the staircase. And there's another tenant who is an older woman and who hates the parrot, and she hears them yelling and arguing. They're yelling about the older woman thinks that the other woman let the parrot out on purpose just to bother her. The other woman is a little hysterical, not really good with confrontation, and she is telling the older woman that she did not let him out, but he does need to be let out in some areas, because if he's not, he's gonna get sick, and he likes the light from this area, and he needs fresh air, and the apartments are so small and stuffy. And they just go on arguing for a little bit until they see Sana. Once they see Sana, they're like, oh, who are you? And Sana introduces herself, and they're like, oh, you're the new tenant. Okay. And they introduce themselves. They talk a little bit. The older woman gets annoyed and just charges off and is just like, I'm done with this noise. And the younger woman with the parrot is like, my bird is not a menace. Like, he just got out because he's been a little sick lately, and he needs this type of air. And she's like, you believe me, right? And Sana's like, sure. So that's how she meets those two. She learns that those are two residents. There's another woman that is a resident that is a little reclusive. They call her like a movie star, that she used to be a movie star. She's super rich, or was super rich, and but never married and never had any family. So now in her older years, she is just there. And they bring it about like it's a sad thing. She's just living there and nobody really talks to her, hangs out. And the landlord of this mansion apartment complex is a man who they call the doctor. They explain that the doctor took over this property, turned it into apartments, and they don't really know where he came from, like his backstory, but they're like, he lost a wife, he does not have any children, and he seems to be a little secretive. And they're like, okay. And I think there was another resident there, a man who's not really mentioned a lot. Like, he's mentioned a few times, but mostly as in helping the other women or arguing with them. And so Sana's there. Sana's at this mansion, and when her father goes to his first day of work, she decides she's going to explore the mansion, you know, like any teenager child would. And she starts to explore the mansion. She looks around, and there's this hallway that seems to go down, and then it's blocked. She's a little fascinated by it. She's like, that's interesting. It's blocked by a bunch of junk, like stuff that people wanted to get rid of but didn't. And she finds out from one of the other tenants that that's kind of the hallway where people throw things to get rid of. Other tenants and people who were previously tenants, when instead of going to throw things out, like, you know, bikes, appliances, dishes, furniture, anything like that, they would just take it by that hallway and throw it away and leave it there. So that's just kind of how this thing accumulated. And Sana's very interested. She's like, well, where does that hallway go? And she finds out that there used to be like another hallway down there, but she's like, nobody really goes in there. And everybody's just like, other than that, we don't know. We don't know. Some reason that hallway is just blocked. We just know that's where things go to get thrown away. And she's very intrigued by this. She starts asking around. She gets really fascinated with this mansion. She's like, well, who owned it before? And nobody can really tell her. They're just like, we don't know. So she's like, all right, that's fascinating. I don't know why nobody knows who used to own this. If there's more area to this mansion than people are letting on. And one of the days she was exploring, she got into that hallway where things were blocked off. Things were blocked off. She was able to find a gate and kind of squeeze through it and head into a different wing of the mansion. And in this wing, she found this one bedroom that it looked like nobody had touched it in decades. Just like nobody had touched it. There was like dust on everything. It looked like an abandoned room. Like somebody just picked up, walked out, and never came back in. Like everything was where it should be. The bed was still made. There was still a wardrobe. The clothes were gone by now, but you could see like strings were where they were at. She goes and she finds a vanity desk, and there's old makeup there. And she starts kind of playing with the makeup, and she sees a camera there, and there's an old photograph of a woman and a man with a baby. And she's like, did they used to live here? Did they used to own this? And she finds a diary there. So she's just sitting there playing with the makeup, and she sees a diary. She can't read the diary because it's written in an old, like, timey way that she's just like, and broken from the language that she's speaking. So she's like, okay, it'll take me some time to understand what this is saying. And so she's just sitting there, she's playing around in the room, and then all of a sudden she feels this oppressive sadness, and the room gets cold. So she's like, I shouldn't be here. So she leaves. And when she leaves, she looks back and she's like, feels like something's around here, but I don't know. But she takes the camera and she takes the diary. And she heads back to the apartment where her dad is, and this is where we first get our first interaction with the Djinn. Doesn't tell us it's a Djinn. It's this presence that, according to it, has been sleeping and trying to die. It has been grieving for so many years that it just wants to die. And it's just moping in its sadness, hanging in the rafters of this room in this mansion. And so that's the little bit we get of the Djinn. And then we go back to Sana. Sana is around, and she notices that light bulbs stop working, that switches stop working, candles get blown out, and there's just like some kind of weird things going around. And some of the tenants, they're just like, yeah, that happens sometime. It just happens sometime for no reason whatsoever. Even when Sana's like, why? Why? And everybody's like, well, we don't know. And reading the journal, Sana finds out the name Mazil. And she's like, well, who is that? Did that person used to own this mansion? And again, everybody's telling her no. So she decides to explore the outside grounds of the mansion. And exploring the outside grounds, she sees that there's this huge garden area. It's overgrown, hasn't been taken care of. And she's like, well, she's like, I bet this was gorgeous. There's this huge fountain in the middle, and she goes around the fountain and she sees these overgrown hedges. And in front of these hedges are iron bars. So it looks like a hedge cage with iron bars in the front. And she's like, that's weird. That's really weird. It's almost like a zoo in here. And she's like, but that's crazy. Who would have a zoo? But at the same time, she was like, maybe they had something, because there's peacocks all over the grounds. And she's seen a giraffe just wandering around the grounds, which initially scared her because she didn't know what it was. And it was towards in the evening area and it just freaked her out. But she's like, there's a giraffe here. There's peacocks here. It's not out of the realm of possibilities that there could be more animals that were locked up here. And she's like, well, what happened? Were they just let go? What happened to these animals? What animals were here? Like, what else was here? There's a lot of cages. And nobody's really able to tell her. She starts asking the doctor a little bit more about what's going on, but he's really evasive with his answers. And she goes to the local town. She tries to go into the records area and see who owned this house. And little by little, using the information that she's getting from the town members and everything, and the information she's getting from the diary, she finds out that a man named Akbar Mazil built the mansion. And built the mansion decades ago. And she's really excited with each little find that she gets. And one of the good things that I really enjoyed about this book is we get Sana's perspective over here, but then it does these flashbacks to what actually was going on in the time frame that she's curious about. So in that time frame, Akbar Mazil, he was a very adventurous, very wanderlusty guy. He hated to stay in one place for very long. He did not like to stay in one place. He liked to do different things. He liked to go on adventures, and he was just always off on the go. So he went to a bunch of different countries, and to help settle him down, his mother arranged a marriage for him. And this marriage, too, was a woman named Janahara. And she came from a well-off family. And this was in India. They were married. And because it was an arranged marriage, he really didn't have a say in it as much. And he was just like, I'm just going to placate my mother. And then here we go. And his mother thought this would slow him down. He would settle down a little bit and just be more stationary. That did not happen. He still wanted to go to all these places. And since he was married, he took Janahara with him. And she hated it. She hated all of the traveling to all of these different places if they did not have like rich English people there. She dressed in all of the very fancy English fashions that were going on in London or the French in Paris, and she was very fashion conscious and kind of refused to do things traditionally. And so she would hang out with the English people. She would talk, she would schmooze, she would dance with them on the ships, and she would always make excuses for her husband because he was like below decks, like hanging out with the crew and drinking and playing cards and doing that kind of stuff. And she was not here for it. She didn't like it. Eventually they get to Africa, and there's a part in Africa that they were going. She was very not enthused about it, and she was like, I hope that we can go home soon. And so he decided that he loved this area in Africa. He fell in love with it, and once he met that place, he kind of lost his will to go to other places. He's like, no, this is it. This is home. And what he did was he bought some sugarcane fields, and he opened up a refinement factory to refine sugar. And with his inheritance money, because he came from a well-off family, and from the money from the sugar farms and everything, he built a mansion for him and Janahara. And during this time, they had 2 children. They had a boy and a girl. And he built this huge mansion, and it was just way more than any of their family would ever need. And because he still enjoyed the little craziness that went on, he made it into like a zoo. Their whole garden was a zoo area. So he built in cages around the fountain, around this like hedge maze that they had. That way that when you were walking through the gardens, it would be like walking through a zoo. You would see different animals. He had all kinds of animals there. And one of his prized possessions was he was able to buy a lion from a traveling circus. And when he bought this lion, he also hired the lion tamer that was training the lion to be able to work for him and kind of help his keepers and gardeners. Wow. Okay. Help his gardeners kind of keep the area in check. And he just enjoyed having a lion and going around to all of this. And Janahara was just like, I'll let him have all of this as long as we're not moving around anymore. So she figured that everything was fine, that she realized that her husband and her weren't really in love, but he gave her security. He gave her 2 children, and she's like, this is fine. There's been worse marriages. But she was just like, what? She was confused on why he didn't love her. Because back in India, she was one of the most beautiful women. She came from one of the richest families. She rubbed turmeric paste on her skin to keep it very light. And she had super long hair. And she was just like, why doesn't he love me? She's like, I was tutored in music, and I was tutored in this, and this, and this, and I know how to do all of these things, and why won't he love me? And she starts to get a little bit bitter about that, but she doesn't have a lot of time to focus on it because Akbar's mom moved with them to Africa. And when his mom moved with them to Africa, they got servants from the mansion and everything. And Janahara was like, this is what I've been raised to do, to run a household. And so she tries to run the household, but Akbar's mom is like, no. And she goes behind Janahara's back to be like, the servants, she told you to do that? No, you're going to do this instead. And it became this thing to where the servants are very confused and they don't really know who to listen to until this continues on until they realize that if they don't do what Janahara says, there's really no repercussions. But if they don't do what Akbar's mom says, Like they could be fired, they could be punished. So they start following her orders over Janahara's, and this just pisses Janahara off to no end. And so far, this is like the biggest conflict that we've seen in the book, is between Janahara and Akbar's mom. And Akbar, he hangs out with his children. He is, in the book, he tells like he's a great father. He hangs out with them. He gives them gifts. He teaches them poetry and how to read. But other than being around his children, he doesn't really like being around the house, like being around the mansion, he likes to go to work early if he can and stay there late if he can, and he just runs the sugar cane fields and all the processes and bringing them in more money. And so Janahar doesn't complain about it, his mom doesn't complain about it, but she's getting a little bit more like, why won't he stand up for me? Why will he not love me more? Even though they have 2 children, she's just like, I don't have enough of his time. And she's like, she gets a little petty with how she wants to treat people in his orbit. And so she's just like, it's fine. She gets really worried over him having an affair. Like she gets it in her head after she's like, I am gorgeous, I am still very, very full of vitality. I could get a lover if I wanted to. I could walk down the road and any man down there would just throw themselves at my feet to be my lover. And when she's going down this little rabbit hole thing in her head, she's just like, what if Akbar's, is he cheating on me? Does he have a mistress? And she starts getting like freaked out and start like freaking herself out over this. And she was like, no, why would he do that? And she's like, his mom would kill him. It just so, no, I don't think he would do that. And so she calms herself down and she's like, everything is fine. She's like, we have 2 children. Everything is fine. She's like, well, maybe we should have another one. Or she's just like, maybe we just need a trip. Maybe we can go home to India. She was like, or what if we go to Paris or London and she's like, see the new things over there. So she's thinking maybe they just need some time together. And well, this is going on, and we have this like mental battle between Janahara and Akbar's mom. We are introduced to Meena. So Meena she is super poor. She comes from the very poorest parts of town, and her family left the town they were in and came to this town here. And when they got there, they all got jobs at the sugarcane field and the factory, because that was the biggest industry in town. So she started working in the sugarcane fields. Her mother started working, her father started working at the fields, and that was just kind of her life. And she's very, like, she wants to know a lot more, but she's still worried about what life has to offer her. She's very grateful, but she's like, I also want more, but I don't know what I want. And she's like, well, once I figure out what I want, the world better beware. Because once I know what it is, that's it. Nothing will stop me from doing the thing. And so when she's doing this, she doesn't meet him yet. Akbar sees Meena in the sugarcane fields, and from the instant he sees her, he is completely smitten with her. It is full on love at first sight for Akbar. So he doesn't want to scare her and ask her to marry him right away, even though he really wants to. What happens is he gives her a promotion. So she ends up working inside the factory as kind of like a maid. So she's doing like the cleaning around the factory, doing the sweeping and everything, and she's moved out of the field. And she knows she gets a promotion. She's like, that's weird. And we find out the reason that she left the other village and her family like escaped that other village is because the last place she was working, her last boss did something like this and tried to he asked her to marry him and she said no. And he asked her again and she said no. And he asked her a third time and she got mad and yelled at him, insulted him a little bit, and told him no. So he tried to attack her and assault her. And so her and her family left that town and came to this town. And now she's really worried. She's like, is this happening again? And she is a very beautiful woman. And she knows that. And she's just like, curse this face. She's like, I do not want this man to do the same things that that other man did. She's like, I won't stand for it. And she's thinking that maybe she can run away. Like she can just get away from the town again and be like, all right, I'm going to go do something off on my own. And she starts kind of fantasizing about this, but she's like, so far he hasn't tried any advances on me. She's like, okay, so as long as he doesn't, she's like, I will continue to work here. And so we have Mina there. We have Akbar who's completely in love with her. We have Janahara being very jealous. And Akbar's mom being very domineering in the household. And so we're seeing little bits and pieces of this mixed in with Sana finding out more and more about Mina. And we find out that these things that are going on is kind of what she's finding out about the mansion. They're just running parallel together, which is very, very neat. It was disorienting the first couple of chapters, but it was just after you got the flow of it, you're like, oh, okay, I got you. So Akbar asks Mina's family if he could have her hand in marriage. And her family is super excited because he didn't ask Mina. He went straight to the mom and dad. And the mom and dad are super excited. He's very rich. He lives in a mansion. This is the best way that their daughter can go up in society. And because he's marrying her, they also get compensation. And so they're like, yes, you can definitely marry Mina. So when he gets that confirmation, he goes back home to the mansion and tells Janahara and his mom that, you know what? I think I'm going to get a second wife. And they're Muslim, so that's part of their religion and their culture. And so she's like, I'm going to get a second wife. And when Janahara hears this, she throws the biggest fit that is in the book. One of the biggest fits. And it's not like a huge tantrum, but it's very unbecoming of a woman in her status. And his mom lets her know. And she's thinking that, you know what, maybe I'm going to kill myself. She's like, maybe I'm going to unalive myself and then he'll see how much he missed with just me. She's like, why does he need another wife? And then she starts speculating on who this wife is going to be. She's like, is he going to start looking for it? Is that what he means? Or does he have somebody already picked out? She's like, is she younger than me? Can she give him more than me? And Akbar's mom is very shocked. And she's just like, what are you talking about? She's like, why would you want to do that? And they come to him and start telling him, like, no, he should not get a second wife. But him being the head of the household and everything, he's like, I'm getting a second wife. That's it. And then he gets up, walks right out. So Akbar's mom blames Janahara for this. She's like, this is your fault. If you took care of my son the way that you're supposed to, then he would need another woman to be his wife. And Janahara takes this to heart. She is very distraught. She refuses to come out of her room for a few days, and she's very upset. And on the other side of that, Mina's parents tell her that she's going to be married to Akbar in a few days, and she's like, the hell I am? No. And she tries to run away. And her family keeps bringing her back and they tell her, this is what you're going to do. And then she's fighting it some more. And then her family finally tells her, she's like, if you don't do this, what the hell else are we going to do? She's like, we have no money. We have nowhere else to go. She's like, you caused the problems in the last village and we had to leave everything there to come here, and now we're living in the slums because of you, and we are trying to better all of our situations here. They're like, so yes, you will marry this man. And when they tell her that in that way, she's like, fine. She's like, fine. So Akbar and Mina get married. She's brought into the house, and when Janahara sees her, she recognizes her from when she used to go visit Akbar, and realizes to her horror that Akbar is marrying a poor woman who used to sweep the floor of the factory. And she laughs a little bit, and she's just like, he's just a little crazy right now. Obviously, this can't be real. He was caught by her beauty. This will be over quickly. And she's like, and then I will be the center of attention. And she's like, and that's fine. And then she was like, and then I will hold this over him for the rest of his life. And she's like, maybe I can get something out of this. Like jewelry or a trip. And so she laughs at her face, and she's just like, yeah, you don't belong here. And Akbar's mom pretty much does the same thing. She is so upset that her son has lowered his standards of marrying to this woman, and she completely ignores her. When she's not ignoring her, she outright insults Mina. And Mina is just kind of there, like, she's like, I can't go back. She's like, first of all, they would just bring me back and they would guilt me and make me feel terrible. And she's like, so I'm stuck here. And she's like, I hope he's not cruel. So Janahara is very confident that Akbar was only temporarily enticed by her beauty. And she's like, this happens, it's fine. She's like, he will quickly get bored of me. She's like, I will not give in to whatever he wants. She's like, I refuse. And she's like, you know what, if he wants me to be like this hoity-toity wife of his, she's like, fuck that, no. She's like, I'm gonna show him exactly the person I am. So she refuses to wear shoes a lot of the times, which just horrifies his mother. She acts more like one of the servants than a wife of the house. She does most of her own laundry. She does her own dishes. They refuse to have dinner with her. They kind of refuse to just incorporate her at all and any of the family stuff. So she's treated more like a servant than anything else, which she's fine with. She's like, whatever, I don't care. And she is given this whole other, she's put in this whole other like wing of the mansion that's away from the main family, because Janahara and Akbar's mom just can't stand to have her near the main house. So she's put in the room over there, and she's like, that's fine with me. I don't care. I don't care. I don't care. And so she's there, and every night Akbar comes to her room. And he brings a newspaper, and he brings a cup of tea, and I think it's a pipe. I'm pretty sure it's a pipe. And he sits there and he reads the paper and sits in a chair in her room while she usually is like messing with something, sewing with something. And then he continues to do this day after day. And then when it gets time for bed, he goes over and he tells her good night, and like very formal, very, very nice of him. Like he's very, I don't know the word, formal, I guess. He gives her a little bow, tells her to have a good night, and he'll see her tomorrow. And he leaves the room. And she's confused by this. And she was like, if he wanted just sex, she's like, he would have done it by now. She's like, what does he want? Like, he doesn't really talk to me. And I was like, I'm shunned by the rest of the family. And she's like, I don't really know what's going on. And she keeps getting confused every time he comes around. And then one night she kind of snaps at him and starts like asking him, well, why did you marry him? Why do you want me here? What's your game? And he tells her, like, very matter-of-factly, he was like, well, I wanted to marry you because you're beautiful and I love you. And this catches her off guard. She's like, what? No. And he's like, yeah, I love you. And I, he's like, I wanted to marry you. And he was like, I figured you'd start talking to me when you wanted to. He was like, he's like, so I didn't want to push you. And she's like, well, that's very nice of him. And she's just like, okay. She's like, well, why? And he told her that he saw her and that he fell in love with her, and he tried to learn all he could about her. And he said there's not a lot of information about her out there. He even asked her family, he asked friends, he asked people who worked at the factory, trying to get all this information about her. And he figured that when she felt comfortable talking with him and opening up to him, now that they're married, that he would get more information. And she was just, and she's like, why do you want to know about me? And he's like, well, because I love you. And we're married. And she starts asking him, she's like, well, I don't know anything about you, really. And so he like folds his paper, he puts it down, and he's like, ask me whatever you want to know. And that's how they start talking. So that night they were talking until it was time for bed, and then he like bows to her, everything's like, have a good night, I'll see you tomorrow. And then next night he comes along and he's sitting there, he has his newspaper, and they start talking some more. They start just having these conversations at night, and pretty soon she's like, well, he's not a bad guy. He's definitely not a bad guy. And so she's surprised by it. He finds out more information about her, and he's super fascinated with her. And one of the nights he brings her a camera. And with the camera, he shows her how to use it. And he was like, I saw this and I thought of you. He's like, so I got you this. And she thinks that's just like one of the best things in the world ever. And she asks him to read some of the paper to her. And he finds out that she can't read. So he starts reading the paper to her. He starts bringing books up when he goes to see her in the evening. He starts reading her poetry. He starts reading her stories. He starts reading her all kinds of things that he has in his library. And then they start progressing their relationship more, and she finds out that she really likes him too. And they fall in love. Like, we get to see from where she was just like, I hate this man, and he's a terrible, terrible man. But through just talking, communicating, and, you know, he bought her gifts, since he bought her the camera, he bought her makeup, he'd bring all these little gifts to her. And once they actually started talking and he would start reading to her and everything, they actually fell in love. And then he started spending nights over in her room. And when that started happening, Janahara realized that after like a few months that this was not going to stop. She realized that he might actually like Mina, and she got super bitter. She realized that Akbar doesn't come to visit her in her room anymore. And so she's starting to get worried about her place in the house, and his mom is still just being terrible to both of them, but not as terrible to Janahara as she is to Mina. And Mina and Janahara had a confrontation before she knew Akbar, and before they started talking, where Janahara told her, she's like, what the hell are you doing here? You do not belong here. You are a lowly servant. You do not belong in this house. You do not belong in this marriage. And she was like, it would make everybody have such a happier life if you were to just disappear. And Mina said, as soon as he releases me, I'll be gone. She was like, I don't want to be here. I don't want to be around you. I don't want to be around your mother-in-law. And she was like, I want to go live my life somewhere else. And so that made Janahara feel a lot better about where Mina standing was on this, until that Akbar started spending nights with Mina and not spending nights with her. And then she realized, she was like, that little bitch lied to me. She's like, she's working magic on Akbar. She's like, that's what it is. She's like, this is witchcraft. And so Janahara gets more and more bitter as this is going on. And soon enough, Mina gets pregnant. And when Mina gets pregnant, his family, Akbar, is super excited. He is very, very excited and happy for her to have his baby. And his mother and Janahara are very more upset with this news, because this news kind of solidifies that she's gonna be here a while. He's not getting tired of her. In fact, he's spending more and more time with her. He stopped spending more time at the sugarcane fields and at his office, at the factory, everything, and he is rushing home from there just to come and spend time with his children and Mina. And he takes her around the zoo. He reads to her. He's teaching her how to read and how to write. And he bought her stacks of notebooks and pens and inks and all of this stuff. And he's teaching her how to write in, I think, a couple of different languages. And she's getting really happy, even though she still is treated like a servant and she still does all of her own things, because Akbar's mom told the servants not to do anything for her. Do not listen to her at all. She is not here. She is invisible. Even though they like her. Like she's like them. and at first the servants were very annoyed that there was going to be her coming in as a second wife. They were really worried about the power dynamics that were going on. And they're like, well, who do we listen to then? And they were all just like laughing. They're like, we all know it'll be his mom. Like that's the person who has the reins on everything. You're like, it doesn't matter if there's a second, third, fourth, fifth, or sixth wife coming in, it'll always be her. And but they're starting to warm up to Mina because she treats them like people. And she's super polite to them. She does all of her own things, like I said. And now that she's pregnant, she's more just happy, and Akbar's happy. And with Janahara not being happy, she starts telling her two children that Mina is a witch, and she put a love spell on their father to take him away from them, from the family. And Janahara and Akbar's mom start coming up with ways to induce a miscarriage. And like kind of out loud fantasizing on how that could be done. And what will happen if she gives birth to a child. And they start saying all of these cruel things about her, and all in front of the children. And they keep saying that she's subhuman and that this baby is going to be a little devil and all of this stuff. So when she finally does give birth, Akbar's there and he is super happy. She gives birth to a little boy. And she is always around this little boy. Akbar is always around this little boy. The children start getting annoyed because with a brand new baby, Akbar is spending more time in Mina's wing with the baby. And the sister is the oldest. And she starts telling the younger brother, who is more shy. The sister's very outgoing. She's very just like extroverted. The little boy is more introverted. He's very shy. He doesn't like to be confronted, having confrontations or anything like that. He's very subdued. And so his sister usually kind of gets one off on him and just like runs the whole show. And she starts telling him that they need to get rid of the baby. And he's like, what do you mean we need to get rid of the baby? And she's like, you heard Mom. And like, Grandma. It's like, that baby is the way that the evil witch Mina is controlling our father. And she's like, what if she keeps having more demon babies? And she's like, I bet it has a tail. She's like, what if they try and kill us? Just to have father all to themselves. And she starts freaking out her little brother, and she starts like filling his head with all of the stories that she's heard her mother and her grandmother say about Mina and the baby. So when the baby is, I think, like a week old, maybe two, it's the first time that Mina is not sitting right beside the baby. Akbar tells her that the baby is asleep. Let's go for a walk. Let's go for a walk. The baby's fine. The baby's asleep. Nobody comes over here. It's gonna be fine. Let's go for a walk. And she doesn't want to, but she misses just spending that time with Akbar. So she's like, okay, let's go. And this was the perfect moment for the children to get to the baby. They take the baby and they hide the baby in a trunk in a different part of the house and put a bunch of towels and blankets over the baby and kind of close the trunk so people can't hear the baby cry, and close the trunk and leave the baby there. When Mina comes back from her walk, she goes straight to the baby and realizes the baby's not there. So she starts to get hysterical. She starts screaming that her baby is missing. And she goes straight to Janahara and accuses her of taking her baby. And Janahara almost slaps her. And she's like, what the hell would I want with your filth? And so that's the kind of reception she's getting from Janahara and Akbar's mom. The servants start looking all over the place. She's beside herself. Akbar's trying to look all over the place. They cannot find this baby. And she starts crying. She breaks down in tears, and she's telling Akbar that his family has killed her baby. And he tells the servants to look again all over the place. And they're like, we looked, we can't find anything. And this is the time where his son comes up to him and realizes like how terrible she is doing. And he's like, she could not be acting this way if she was a witch, right? If she was evil, why would she care? And he starts feeling very uncomfortable on this whole situation. And Akbar turns onto the children and asks them, have they seen the baby? Do they know where the baby is? His daughter, cool as a cucumber, is like, nope. Why would I touch the baby? I don't know. And he looks at his son, and his son had his head down, and like, if you have children, or if you've seen a child being asked a question like, did you take this? Did you do this? And you know that they did, and they don't know that you know, but they know. So they just kind of drop their head and they're trying not to look at you. They're just looking guilty as hell. That's just kind of what this child looked like. And it was fully put out in the book of like how he's doing, like how he looks and how he's acting. So Akbar realizes he may know something about the baby. So he questions him more, and then his son finally breaks. He tells him his sister made him do it, that they took the baby, and because Mina's a witch and they're trying to save his father. And Akbar is super shocked by this. Super shocked, because with how terrible Janahara and his mother have been acting towards Mina, he has never seen it. Like, never really. He's noticed that they're cold to her, but he's never actually outright face to face seen how terrible they treat her. And so they run to where the baby is after the boy shows them, and they pull it out. The baby is so cold and almost blue. And they finally get the baby to start crying again. They get the baby warmed up, and the baby is fine. Like after a few hours. And Mina goes back to her wing, and after finding the baby, and she's just like, I can't deal with this. I can't. And Akbar calms her down. He gets her to her room with the servants, and he's just like, he tells the servants, he's like, nobody goes in or out of this room. He's like, if she leaves the room, somebody better come and get me. Like right away. And they're like, yes, sir. And then he comes back to Akbar's mom and Janahara, and he yells at them. And this is the first time that he has ever yelled at them and been super angry. And Janahara is just like, well, the kids did it. I didn't do it. And he said, you might as well have. He's like, they're children. They are innocent. They do not know better. He's like, this is all from you and my mother's poison being put into their heads. And he shames them. He gets so mad at them, and he tells them that he would rather everything go to Mina and have her in his life than both of them if they're going to keep like this. He was like, I will take care of my children. He was like, but if you guys try and do something like this again, he was like, you're both going back to India with none of my help. So he pretty much tells Janahara that he will divorce her and he will disown his mother. And they are really shocked. They're like, how dare you? Like, you can't do that to me. He's like, for that servant girl? And he's like, that is my wife. And you will treat her as such. And like, he gets really mad. This is the first time, like I said, that he's been mad at, they've heard him mad at any time. And so this is like a weird tipping point for the family, and he gets mad at them, everything, and he tells them that they will tell the children that she is not a witch. He will tell them that she is just a person, and she will be there for a very long time. And he goes back to Mina to watch over her and the baby. And the children are still there and still very like shocked. Like, they're very confused, and Janahara makes them go to bed, everything, and they still kind of ignore Mina, but they keep out of her way. Like, if she enters a room, they get up and they leave, and Mina is totally fine with that. But after this incident, the son goes and he starts talking to Mina. And like, he kind of follows her around when she has the baby, just kind of shadowing her. And she starts talking to him. Kind of like how her and Akbar went their little back and forth at the beginning. Like, she starts talking to him, and eventually he talks to her. And they just kind of hang out and start talking. And since he's super shy, it's a very big milestone in their relationship, that he's just sitting there talking to her. And he comes and he visits her, and she tells him little stories that she used to know when she was growing up. And he really enjoys when she's singing to the baby, that she sings to the baby a lot. And that's initially why he just started gravitating towards her, was because of her singing. So he's becoming more, I guess, nice to her, and realizing that maybe she's not a witch who bewitched our father. And the girl was like very unconvinced. She's just like, oh no. She's like, Dad said no, but if he is bewitched, he would probably say no anyway. She's like, I don't know, I'm skeptical. And so the baby continues to grow, and we are introduced to the Djinn. The Djinn's backstory is he was created from the point before man was created. And he walked the earth before man and was in tune with all of nature and all the animals. He was able to speak with all animals without having to do much of anything. And he just kind of roamed around enjoying the songs and the trees and all of this type of stuff. And once man came around, he enjoyed them until he saw how violent men are and how noisy they get. And at this point, by the time man was around everything, he was very tired. He was old enough that he was just like, nothing really interests me anymore. And he just wanted to sleep. And he just wanted to sleep and be away from man because it was too noisy. The smells were weird. It was a lot to take in, and he didn't want to have anything to do with that. So he started just roaming the earth to get further and further away from man. But man, doing all of the exploring and expanding of their empires, kept coming closer. So he kept having to wake up and then go further away. And during this time, he used to be able to become real, to become corporeal. And that's how he would roam around the earth the majority of the time. And once he was hiding and stuff, he became incorporeal, so he's like invisible, and he would just kind of avoid people that way. So after hundreds of years of being invisible, he lacked the energy to become visible again, to become corporeal. He can't do it. And at this point, he's just like, well, what do I do? He's like, man is everywhere. They're everywhere. And he's like, I can't become physical again to be able to scare them away from where I'm at, because he just doesn't have the energy. So he just continues to roam a little bit, and while he's roaming during these times, he gets to a beach, and he sits there and enjoys the ocean for a little bit, trying to figure out what he's going to do next. And he hears singing, and this singing is coming from Mina. So he's really fascinated with Mina. The singing brings him in, and he gets so fascinated with her and the way her mind works that he starts following her around. And he's just like, I want to know more about this little mortal woman. And he just follows her. He was there when the first employer tried to assault her and she got away, and he followed her to the town. He was there with her in the sugarcane fields, and then when she got married to Akbar, and he followed her into the mansion. And he doesn't like Akbar because that takes her attention. Like she loves him, and she outwardly shows that she loves him, and he's jealous of that love. He's jealous to see it, but he's at the same time, he loves her so much that he's happy that she's able to show love to another people. And so he's still following her around. When the baby comes, he's also fascinated with this baby because it's an extension of her. And so he's there, he's around, and he's just like, this is kind of where I am. And Sana, at this point, we go back to Sana. Sana has been exploring more and more of the house, and the journal ended around this time, and she doesn't really know why. Like there's some more into it, but it looks like something was scribbled on. Some of the journal is damaged, so she can't really find out more. And the residents of the mansion have been having these little get-togethers because Sana's father can cook. And it's the first time that they've had like somebody who's a cook who can cook other things come into the house. So he's been cooking, and they've been having these huge dinners instead of being off sequestered to their own apartments. And one of the residents, the older woman, is just like, in my day, men never cooked, and all of this type of things. And they eventually get the movie star woman to come down and eat with them. And Sana finds out that, yes, she was a movie star. She was offered a lot of marriages when she was younger, but decided that she hasn't had her big film yet, so she did not want to get married. And so she never did. But the jobs dried up, and now she does piano lessons to get money to pay rent. But other than that, she's still waiting to have her big break, even though it's been years and years. And so Sana's been asking her about love, about things, because she's been reading in the journal. And the movie star woman gives her like love is tragedy. And she goes around to each of the residents and gets all of what they think love is. And they each give her their own perspective that tells a lot into their backstories. You have the movie star woman who is love is tragedy. because she fell in love once and it fell through, and then now she's stuck in this place. You have the older woman who tells her love is superfluous because when she got married as a younger girl, her husband was an alcoholic and very violent, and when he finally died, she was like, this is it. Like, he made her into this hardened woman that San is there right now, who is very critical of the way people are and very abrasive enough that her daughter will only come to visit her every now and then because of what she grew up with. And you have the woman who has the parrot, who has kind of a fairy tale view of love but doesn't really know what love is. And she has her father who talks about her mother, and that's what love was. So he's like, that was real love. And he's like, and love is also what we have. He's like, I love you. And like that father child love. And so she's been asking all of these questions, and the journal ends, and she's worried she's not going to find anything else about what happened to this family that lived in this house. And she starts becoming depressed by it. But everybody keeps telling her, like, that's not something a kid should be doing anyways. Like, go do something else. Go do something healthy. And so she gets a little bit better, but then she starts getting a little depressed again because things start reminding her of what Mina and Akbar's life must have been. And so while everybody's becoming closer in this apartment complex instead of being complete strangers, she's still not feeling well. Like, she's just like kind of depressed by it. She's excited everybody's together, but just kind of depressed. And one of the nights after dinner, the doctor's like, hey, do you want to go take a walk? He's like, I heard you've been exploring the mansion. And she's like, yeah. And he's like, I have something new that you probably haven't seen. And she's like, okay, what is it? And he's like, come on, I'll show you. And so he takes her to this library, and it has like a dome over it and has floor to ceiling windows and the skylight and everything. And it's this huge space, except it's partially flooded. It looks like some of it sank, so it's like down at an angle, and then that part's flooded. Some of the windows are broken, so there's a lot of the books that are water damaged. And she's just like, this is a beautiful room. And he's like, yeah. He's like, it was always my favorite. And she finds some old, like, little army men, like little tin or pewter army men on the ground, and she picks them up, and he's like, oh, those are still here. He's like, that's weird. And she's like, what do you mean? And he tells her about his backstory. So the doctor, when he became an adult, he decided that he wanted to leave India because that's where he was raised. And he said that he had a falling out with some of his family members, and he just wanted to get away. Like, he just wanted to get away from India. He wanted to go as far away as he could. And during this time, he was like, there was the war going on. He's like, so I joined the military, and he became a doctor, a medic in the military. And so he said he saw all of these atrocious things. And then after the war, he decided that he still didn't want to go home, but didn't really know what to do. So when he was in the military as a doctor, he was injured. And when he was injured, he met a nurse. And I don't know if he was fully in, he did military service as a doctor, and then he also worked like as a Doctors Without Borders doctor to help in war-torn countries and third world countries to help treat them and help them out. And that's what he did a lot of the time. During one of those two, he fell into an attack. Like there was an attack in that area and he got injured. And he laughed thinking about it. He was like, doctors will make the worst patients. He's like, I refused to listen to my nurses and my doctors. I kept telling them what I knew to be best. And he said, that's when I met her. Sana's like, who? And he's like, my wife. And he said that she was the only nurse to like flick him on the head and be like, stop it. And she was always happy, always smiling, always dancing around when music was there. And he said she was so vivacious that she was like, he was just dumbstruck when she was around. And they met when he was her patient, and then they traveled together around after they got married. He took her on dates to the movies, and they fell in love, they got married, and they traveled around as a doctor and a nurse. And so he said that was their life. They were really happy with that. And he said there was a problem with her conceiving, so they never had children. And he said he was fine with that as long as he had her in his life. And he said he felt so much love for her. And I don't remember how, but she passed away. And when she passed away, that devastated him. And he walked around in this deep depression. And he would always get phone calls from his mother asking him to come home. Come home to India and just be home. And he had nowhere to be. He had nothing to live for because he was so depressed that he went home. He went home to India. And then he found out about this mansion. And it was the mansion that his father built. And Sana is like freaking out. She's like, what? You lived here? And he was like, yeah. He's like, though. It's very implied. He's like, those were my toys. He's like, I used to live here. And she tells him about the diary and all the things she knows. And she was like, what happened? And he tells her. So when Mina's son was a few months old, Janahara couldn't take it anymore. She couldn't take it. She figured that she is the best at everything, the most beautifulest, the most smartest, all of that, that Akbar just needed to be separated from Mina to be able to see her value again, so he would become enamored with her. She said she thought, she was like, I'm going to full on seduce him, and he will realize that he doesn't need Mina, and hopefully just finally kick her out. So she comes up with a plan. She contacts her family in India and has her mother, kind of explains to her mother that her and her Akbar and the children, they need a break, they need a vacation. But Akbar won't leave unless there's an emergency in India. So she convinces her mother to send in telegrams urgently saying that Janahara's father is on his deathbed and they need to go and visit him before he goes. And so her mother, thinking that like, okay, well, we'll help out. If you guys just really need this excuse for a vacation, that's fine. So she does. She sends these telegrams letting them know that her father is ill. He's on his deathbed. They need to come and visit before he passes. And Janahara tells Akbar, she's like, we need to go home to India. We need to go home to India. And at first he wants to just send her, but she's like, no, what would that be saying? Like socially, if we come and you don't go with us. And he was like, well, the baby's too young to travel, and I don't know if I can leave Mina. And Janahara kind of manipulates him into being like, no, leave Mina here. We need to go. And he talks to Mina about this, and Mina's like, she's your wife. That's your family. Of course you have to go. Of course you have to be there. That is your father-in-law. You'll need to go. You'll need to wish him well. And she's like, and then you come back home to me. And that settles it. Akbar's like, all right, fine. He's like, we'll go and Mina will stay here. And he's super worried about Mina. And Mina's like, if your mother and Janahar are out, she's like, I'll be fine. I'll be fine. She's like, I will only need 2 rooms. In her wing, Akbar renovated an attic space. That in her room, there's this ladder that comes down, and there's this attic space up there. He put a desk there. He put a typewriter there. He put all of her writing materials in there, and also like a bassinet for the baby. Everything, and like renovated it for her, so that can be her own personal writing room. And she loves it. She's like, I'm only going to be, besides the kitchen to get food, she's like, I'm going to only be in these 2 rooms. She's like, I'll be fine. And she's like, send me some telegrams when you get there. And she's like, I'll be waiting for you when you get back. And so he's like, all right. And Janahara sets it all up. They're going to go on this huge ship, and they're going to go back to India, and she's going to fully try and seduce him all the way back. And she's like separated from Mina, because Mina's a local. She's not Indian. She's a local from Africa. And she's like, once we get back to India, he will see that I am the better choice. Just give that distance away from Mina and some time away from Mina and that baby. She's like, he'll see that I'm the better choice. And so they go on the ship. They go back to India. And while at India, Akbar's super surprised. Janahara's father is doing quite well. And this just kind of gets glossed over. It's kind of put through like he made a miraculous recovery, and Akbar just kind of goes with it. And Janahara and his mother tell him that it would be rude if they didn't stay like at least a week or 2. At the very least. They haven't seen their family in years. So Akbar acquiesce, and he's like, all right, fine. And through all of this, he's just like, I just want to go back. He's like, I want to go back home to Mina. And Janahara is very disappointed and depressed that her plan didn't work. So she decides to pamper herself some more and completely lies to her friends and family, saying that she is the most adored and the most richest, and everybody is jealous of her in Africa. And she just kind of goes on with that, and then she does a lot of shopping, a lot of just being around and being a socialite. And back at the mansion, the servants that were there were sent home. Mina told them that she didn't need them there. She can cook and clean for herself. They deserve a break as well. So they should just take a week or 2 off, like a week off, and it'll be fine. They'll come back. Everything will be okay. And she laughs because she looks at, as she's going into the kitchen, all the china, the good china and everything that were like on display were hidden, because Akbar's mom was worried that without them there, she was going to sell off and or break all of their good rich things. So she had the servants hide them. And Mina finds this very amusing. And she's just like, whatever. So she just goes about making food for her and the baby, and then going up to her room, reading and writing, and just kind of waiting for Akbar to come back. And one of these nights, she hears something break in the house. And she doesn't know what it is, so she picks up the baby and she goes to check it out. She hears a little crashing and stuff, and she goes towards the kitchen where most of the noise was, and finds a lot of things are broken. There's things on the ground. There's some food stuff that are just all over the place. And she's like, what is this? She starts getting worried. And She has a knife that she grabs from the kitchen, and she's just like starting to freak out a little bit. And she continues to go check the house as she hears more noises. And she finds a lion there. So the lion sees her and goes to attack her. It gets her foot, or not her foot, like her ankle or around her knee area, and she stabs it and runs back to her room, closes the door, and barricades herself in with her wardrobe. And the baby's crying. The lion is aggressive, trying to get into this room. And she's worried. She's like, how do I get help? She's like, how do I get out of here? And the rooms are really, the windows are there, but she's like, it's too steep. She's like, I don't know if I can do that with the attack on my leg. So she rips up some sheets. She bandages her wound. She gets like ties it all off and everything. And she's like, that's going to have to do. And she puts the baby in a sling and she ties it to herself. And she opens up the window. She's going out. She's like, I don't know if I can do this. She's like, it's very slick. And the door is getting pushed in. So you have the door, and then she like pushed the wardrobe in front of it. But the door's being pushed with so much force that the wardrobe is about to fall. So she's freaking out. She's panicking. And she has the baby tied in a sling around her back. And she opens up the window and is ready to crawl out. Except with the injury to her leg, she cannot put weight on it. Every time she tries to, her whole leg gives out. And the window is a sheer drop. And it's high enough that if she were to jump from it, that her and the baby would die. So she tries to get onto this pipe area out there, and she slips and she falls. And she's able to catch herself a little bit, but she can't climb down. And the lion is blocking her only way out. So she is very, 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 very scared. So she climbs back into the bedroom. And by this time, the wardrobe is fully almost open. It's fully, like, the door's almost open. The lion has like half of its body in there. And so she grabs the ladder, pulls it down, takes the baby up, and she goes into the ladder room and pulls up the ladder. The attic room, pulls up the ladder, and the lion breaks in just right at that moment and is trying to jump at her. She closes the little door of it, and she hears the lion still just being super aggressive. And she is very worried about what's going to happen. She's like, there's no neighbors around here. There's nobody that's going to be showing up around. She's like, for another week. Because the servants will start coming back. And she was like, but what if they're attacked? And she's like, I don't know. She's like, I don't think we can make it a week. Because there's no food, there's no water up there. She has the baby. And she's like, I don't know what to do. And so she's freaking out, trying to figure out what to do. And it turns out that Janahara, while she was planning this trip, she also bribed the lion tamer. So the lion tamer does not like Akbar, because the lion tamer is a very cruel man who cruelly beat the lion in the circus. And he would beat the lion and whip the lion to try and get the lion to do tricks. And he was trying to show off in front of Janahara and the children and Akbar by cruelly hitting the lion to try and get it to do a trick. And Akbar got mad at him, yelled at him that he will not hit the lion anymore. And he will not be treated like that. And if he treats the lion like that again, then he will be fired. So since then, the lion tamer just did not like Akbar. And so what he did was he was bribed by Janahara to beat the lion aggressively and starve the lion. And once they left the house, like a couple of days after they left the house, they would open, or he would put the lion, let the lion loose inside the house. And she hoped that the lion would eat Mina and the baby. And it would be a terrible accident. And they would get back and they would find out what happened, and it would be so sad, and Akbar would be devastated, and she would be standing there with arms wide open to comfort him. So this was her plan. And she was hoping that on the trip to India and around India, she could get her husband to come around and show her more affection. However, he was just worried about Mina and the baby. So she's like, well, that part didn't work out. She's like, but we still have what's going to happen at the house. And Mina is in the house for a couple of days, and the baby is crying and upset, and she's just like, okay. And the lion keeps trying to make jumps for the attic room, and one of the days she's able to not hear the lion. Like, she opens up the attic door a crack, and she's like, all right, I think the lion got bored. The lion moved on, and hopefully everything is fine. And so she decides to leave the baby in the attic because her leg is getting worse. And she said it might be infected. Like, she's thinking, she's like, it might be infected. She's like, I need help. I need help. But she's going to leave the baby in the attic in case she can't. And she's like, with the way it is, she's like, I can't carry the baby with me and move fast enough to go get help. So she leaves the baby in the attic, all nice and snuggled. And she climbs down the ladder, and she's like, all right, it's super quiet. I don't hear the lion anywhere. And she starts to move around the room and climb over the wardrobe, and she's trying to make her way out of the house. She said, the nearest neighbor is this far away. I can go straight into the town. I can go to the tavern and have people, and they can bring guns and take care of the lion, and everything will be fine. And this is her plan to do this. So she's like, okay, she's trying to climb down the stairs quietly, and she finds that the lion is still there. So when the lion tamer put the lion in the house, the lion tamer locked the lion in the house, did not leave like an open door or anything. So the lion's locked in there, and the lion is starving. And so he sees Mina, and he chases Mina, and he catches up to Mina, and he unalives Mina. And so that is the scene that the servants walk into. They open up the door, and the lion runs out, and they are terrified about that. And they run in after the lion leaves, and they lock themselves in. And they go to check on Mina, and they see in her wing is this huge mess. There are pieces all around, and they hear a baby crying. So they go up to the attic, and they get the baby, and the baby is starving but fine. And so the baby is saved, but Mina is gone. There's just like no way to save Mina. So the servants tell people in the town gets all up in arms. They go track the lion down, and they put down the lion. And they clean up the house as best as they can, and they bury Mina. And all of this is during that like week, I think it's like 2 weeks that Akbar is gone. And they're on the way back from India, and they're going back to Africa. Akbar is super excited. He is very giddy about seeing Mina and the baby again. And Janahara was just like, she's trying to keep her cool, but she's still like, we still have this one thing. It's fine. It's fine. It's fine. And when they get back there, the servants tell Akbar what happened. And Janahara is very shocked by this. Like, she put the plan in motion. She paid the guy to do this thing. And she is surprised that it still happened. And like she's surprised by it, but after a while she's like, all right, this is where Akbar's gonna break down, and I'm gonna be here. Except when Akbar finds out what happens and he's holding the baby, he's just like, what? And they tell him that Mina was attacked and killed by a lion, and that they were able to get the lion, but nobody has seen the lion tamer. Like, we think he skipped town. We don't know if he saved up money or if he stole money, but he's gone. And they've been trying to find him, but so far no luck. And so Akbar hands the baby back to the servants, and Janahara and his mom are trying to console him, but he doesn't want to be around either of them. He just gives the baby to the servants, gets up, and walks out the door. And his mom and Janahara are just kind of going along with their normal lives. They're like, we don't know what to do with this baby. They just have the servants keep the baby for right now. And so Akbar left, and that night when Janahara is expecting Akbar to be back, she's like, he hasn't come back for dinner. She's like, I'm worried. Where could he be? They get word from a police officer who got information from a fisherman. So a fisherman off the coast was doing his just fishing like a fisherman do. And he said he saw a man take off his clothes and walk into the ocean. And he thought the man was going for a swim. And then he turned around, continued to fish. He looked back and he didn't see the man swimming. And then he got worried and went back and could not find the man. So Akbar went and unalived himself in the ocean because Mina was gone. And once that news travels to Janahara, Janahara tells her whole family and the servants to pack everything up. They are going back to India. And she's just like, this is what we're doing. And this is when Akbar's mom stops fighting. Her son is gone. The doctor tells Sana that he's like, all the fight left out of her. He's like, everything left out of her. He's like, she just gave up. So she was super docile at that point. He said the only time that she ever stood up to Janahara again was when it came to Mina's son. And Akbar's mom made Janahara set up a fund for his son, and her son would be given to her family and left in Africa, and funds would be set aside for his well-being and his education and everything like that. He said other than that, that is the only time that his grandmother ever did anything. He said after that she was dead inside. And Sana is super shocked by all of this, and the doctor was just like, I was playing with those toys when the night that my mom picked me up and we had our suitcases repacked and she took us back to India. He's like, that was the night. He's like, and nobody ever set foot into this house again until I came back from India. And Sana asked him how he knew all of this, and he said that he knew how his mother treated Mina and how she acted when they got back to India. And she kind of threw on this like big false story of how her husband died, and she made it into he got attacked by a lion, or there was an accident at one of the sugarcane fields or something like that, so she didn't have to tell people he unalived himself. And he said he grew up disappointed in her, and he remembered how he treated Mina. And so when he got old enough to leave his family house, he did, because he said that she got worse she got older and she started to believe her lies and everything. And so he left, and she didn't disapprove of his wife because his wife was not Indian, and he didn't want to do the arranged marriage type of thing that she wanted him to do. And so they had a lot of tension in their relationship, and that's why he left the country and traveled all over the place. And then when his wife died, he went back to India, and he was also dead inside, just like his grandmother. And that's right before his mother passed away, is when he found out all this information from her about Mina. And that's when he realized that he did have a brother. He had a half brother that was still in Africa that nobody ever talked about. So that in the house were the original reasons why he went to Africa. And he's been trying to find his brother, and he said he found him. He's like, but I don't know what to say to him. And he's like, I don't think he knows who I am. He is a lawyer and works in the local community. He has a wife, he has a family. He's very, very well known, well liked, does a great job in this area. And Sana tells him that maybe you should just go say hi. Because the doctor tells her that he sent him a letter very recently, but he's just like, I don't know. And she's like, you should just go say hi. She's like, that's your brother. Go say hi. And so he's like, maybe you're right. And they've been talking for a long time. It's nighttime fully in this library, and he walks her back to her apartment, and he thanks her for talking with him. And then we hear from the Djinn's part. After he was hanging around when the doctor was telling the story of what happened to Mina. And during this, he gets super sad, super upset, reliving through it. There's rain starting to happen from his emotions, because he used to be able to talk to animals. He could have told the lion to stop. But because he had been dormant for so long, he no longer had the energy, and he could no longer speak the languages of the animals. And he was trying to warn Mina of what was going on and trying to help her through this, but because no energy, he couldn't do anything, and he helplessly watched as she died. So he is now super upset all over again, reliving the loss of Mina. And at this time in the mansion, when it's nighttime, everybody's getting ready to go to sleep and everything, a fire happens. There's an electrical problem within the house that causes a fire. And in this fire, Sana wakes up, and her father wake up, and it's super smoky. There's fire going around all over the place. Everybody's freaking out. It's very chaotic, and they're trying to figure out what to do and how to leave the area. Sana's freaking out that she can't find her dad after they originally left the apartment. They're on their hands and knees. Her father covers her in a blanket and tells her not to breathe in the smoke. And they're crawling to try and get out. Except Sana gets turned around and then loses her father. So she doesn't know where her dad is, and she doesn't know where to go. And she's starting to panic because the smoke is getting thicker. There's heat coming around. She can now see the flames of the fire. And she's starting to get worried that she's going to die in a fire. And at this time, the Djinn finally gets up enough energy. He decides that he is not going to let her die like he let Mina die. He is not going to let her down. He is going to do everything he can. And then he is kind of excited, because one of the things that can kill a Djinn is fire. So he uses like subtle manipulations of trying to like move little items of things and kind of move things around to show Sana how to get out of the mansion. And she does. She gets out of the mansion, and there's firemen holding her father back because her father's screaming that his daughter's still in there. And he sees her, And he's able to run to her. They hug and he's fine. And she's like, how did you get out? And he's like, it's the damnedest thing. I don't really know how. He's like, I was trying to figure out how to get out, worried about you. And he was like, and then I saw like ways opening up and I went that way. I thought you were right behind me until I turned around as I got out and you weren't. And Sana's freaking about all the residents in the house. She's like, where's everybody else? And she sees the younger woman come out with the movie star. The movie star is holding the younger woman out. The younger woman is freaking out about her parrot. She's like, he's still in there. I need to go get him. The firemen pull them away. And she's starting to get hysterical because she's like, her bird is still in there. And then she hears her bird. She turns around and she sees the older woman holding the bird cage with the bird, like underneath her robe and everything, walking down the steps, coughing and everything. And she runs to her and they're super excited. And she tells her that she was going to leave the bird to be cooked, but she did not want to do that to her, so she brought him out for her. And they're hugging, they're excited. Everybody is able to leave get out of the fire, everybody except for the doctor. The next morning, when it's light out and the fire department has the fire out and everything, Sana keeps asking, what about the doctor? What about the doctor? And the firemen tell them that he didn't make it. It looks like he was trying to fight the fire and make sure that everybody was out, that he didn't get out in time. So Sana is really upset. She's happy that everybody else is safe, but she's really upset that the doctor is gone. And she was able to, when she was leaving, she was able to save Mina's diary as the Djinn was helping her leave the area. And the Djinn at this point is dead too. He felt relief that he was able to save life, that he just let the fire take him. And so Mina's on the outside and she's telling her dad that she finally knows the history of the house because the doctor told her. It's like the doctor was the son of the man who built this place. And she's crying a little bit, and from off the area there's an older man that kind of pushes through, and he was like, I need to talk to somebody. And he says the doctor's name. He's like, did he make it? Is he okay? And Sana goes over and she looks at him and she's like, do you know the doctor? And he pulls out a letter out of his pocket, and he was like, I think he was my brother. And she sees the letter and she starts getting a little hysterical laughing going on. And she was like, so you're Mina's son? And he was like, how do you know my mom's name? And she hands him the diary and she's like, we need to talk. Because when when Janahara set up the funds for Mina's son, it came with not stipulations, but I don't know if it was from Janahara or from his grandparents, but they didn't talk about Akbar. They didn't talk about the mansion or anything. They told him his father died and that Mina was his mother and she left him with them to raise, and that she was able to leave some money aside. And so he never knew that he had other siblings. He never knew that he had another side of the family. And he just grew up assuming that he was an orphan. And then he's like, all right, well, and then he went to law school and he became a local, like, famous lawyer and everything. And so Sana's like, here's the diary and we need to talk. And then it just kind of, I feel like in my head, it panorama'd out to show like the building and then the people excited in the front. And because of all of the way they were changing, like the people, like the daughter from the older woman came and visited, and she told her mother that she can live with her and that they'll find something, like they're trying to figure out like where it's going to go. And it's like happy endings all around. And that was the story for it. Like it was not where I thought it was gonna go. See, when you tell me there's gonna be a a horror novel about Djinn, I think of Wishmaster type stuff. Wishmaster is one of my favorite movies ever. And so I was disappointed in that, but at the same time, the stories it just exploded. We had so many different stories going on in this book, and the way it switched was very, like I said, disorienting at the beginning, but once you got the hang of it, I came to expect it, and I saw how it flowed with the plot and made it go and helped us understand the characters more. And I really, really love this story. It is a very sad, great love story. And the way that so many people just did not get their happily ever afters with these marriages and their partners, I was just like, wow. It was very depressing. It almost made me cry. Almost. And I think that says a lot about how much a book impacted me. But that was The Djinn Waits 100 Years. I gave this book a 5 out of 5. I definitely want to own this book physically because it's so good. It is so good to take my time with it. Like I said, I read it through an audiobook, so I got the pacing of it and everything through that. And I'm just like, I just want to sit there and just dive into this story more and just kind of wrap it around me as this small, depressing blanket. And it was so good. It was so good. Thank you guys so much for joining me. I hope you guys have an amazing day, night, afternoon, whatever it is where you are. And yeah, it is a lot. If you want to hang out with me or join me on Storygraph, all of those links are in the description below. Don't forget to check out the TDLR playlist, and that's for shorter, condensed versions of all of these stories. And then you can also check out That's What She Said playlist. That's where these longer form reviews going, as well as what I read in a month and all of those lovely things. Thank you guys for joining me. I hope you guys have an amazing time, and I'll hopefully see you guys later. Bye.